I've made my living restoring old films, war footage mostly, the kind of grainy reels that end up in documentaries or university archives. Sometimes private collections for veterans' families who want to see their grandfather's war one more time before the film stock disintegrates completely. I work alone, always have. My ex-wife Susan got tired of competing with dead men's memories 3 years ago. Can't say I blame her. My apartment in Portland became half living space, half laboratory. Restoration equipment crowded every surface. Digital scanners, chemical baths, 3 computers running specialized software that cost more than my car. It was a Tuesday, November 11th, 2025, Veterans Day. I was expecting a package, some Iajima footage a collector wanted cleaned up. Standard job, easy money. What arrived instead changed everything. The delivery came at 4:37 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, ready to call it a day. The knock on my door made me jump. My cat, Kubrick, shot under the couch like he'd been electrified. The delivery man looked nervous. Big guy, maybe 63, built like he moved furniture for a living, but he handled the wooden crate like it might detonate. "Sign here," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. I signed. He left fast, his boots heavy on the stairs. The crate sat on my workbench, 2 ft long, 18 in wide, sealed with actual nails instead of screws. Old school construction. I grabbed my crowbar and pried it open. Inside, nested in straw that smelled like basement mold and decades, were 5 film canisters. The metal was oxidized, rust blooming at every seam. Each lid bore a Roman numerali through V and dates written in what looked like German Gothic script. March 3, 1945, March 15, 1945, March 28, 1945, April 10, 1945, April 15, 1945. My German is passable. March means March. These were from the final months of World War II, right before everything collapsed. Underneath the canisters sat a yellowed envelope. Inside, a single typed note. Payment on completion, $15,000, burn nothing. Return digitized copies to P. Box 4419. Helena MT, further instructions will follow. No signature. No explanation of what I was restoring. No client name, $15,000. I needed that money desperately. My rent was 3 weeks overdue, and my landlord had stopped being understanding around week 2. I should have asked questions, should have been suspicious of anonymous clients offering that kind of cash. But desperation makes you stupid, and I was very desperate. I opened canister I. The film inside was 16 militarist stock, the kind used for military field documentation in the 1940s, brittle with age, damaged by moisture and time. It took me 3 hours just to transfer it to my restoration rig without the whole thing crumbling in my hands. By the time I had the first reel digitized enough to view, it was past 11 at night. Rain hammered my windows. Portland was disappearing into November darkness. The city lights blurred through the downpour. I dimmed my apartment lights, hit play, tape 1, Dare Georgia the Hunter, date, March 3rd, 1945, duration 8 minutes 33 seconds. The footage opened on a man checking his rifle. His hands shook badly enough that I could see it even through the grain of 80-year-old film. He was maybe 55, wearing a heavy wool coat and a hunter's cap with ear flaps. Dense pine forest surrounded him, trees heavy with snow, everything gray and white and cold. The light was dying fast. Maybe 400 p.m. in early March at that latitude. A voice behind the camera said something in German. The man, I later pieced together his name, was Hans Dietrich, nodded and started walking. The camera followed. They were tracking something. Dietrich kept stopping, pointing at the ground. The camera would tilt down to show prints in the snow. I leaned closer to my monitor. The prints were enormous, width of a dinner plate, easy. 4 distinct toe marks, each ending in claw indentations that sank 2 inches into frozen earth. But the stride length made my stomach drop. These weren't bare tracks. Whatever made them was walking upright, bipedal. The distance between prints was consistent with something tall moving on 2 legs. Dietrich knelt by one print, touched it with his gloved hand. He looked up at the camera and said something. I didn't need translation. His tone said everything. This was wrong, unnatural. They kept moving deeper into the forest. Shadows lengthened. Dietrich lit a kerosene lantern that threw jittering yellow light across the snow. Then I heard it through my speakers. A sound from somewhere in the distance. Low frequency, felt more than heard, not a wolf howl. I've heard plenty of those in nature documentaries. This was deeper, with a wet resonance in the back of the throat, almost like a human voice trying to imitate a wolf and failing. Dietrich froze mid-step, raised his rifle. The camera operator's breathing suddenly loud on the microphone panned across the terrain. For just a moment, caught in the swaying lantern light, I saw eyes shine. 2 points of yellow reflection, maybe 8 ft off the ground, too high for any wolf, too high for a bear standing upright. Dietrich whispered something urgent in German. He was backing up now, rifle still raised, finger on the trigger. The sound came again, closer, and underneath it. The sharp crack of branches breaking under substantial weight. Whatever was out there was moving, circling them. I could track it by the sounds, moving left, then stopping, then right, testing them, hurting them. Dietrich fired 3 times in rapid succession. The muzzle flash whitewashed the frame, the gunshots deafening even through my headphones. I flinched despite knowing this happened 80 years ago. Silence. Complete suffocating silence for 30 seconds. Just Dietrich's ragged breathing and the hiss of the kerosene lantern. Then something hit him from outside the frame. I didn't see it coming. 1 second, Dietrich was standing there, rifle smoking. The next, he was gone, yanked sideways so violently that the camera operator stumbled. The camera fell. The image spun. Snow, sky, trees, ground. It landed at an angle, lens pointed at nothing useful, but the audio kept recording. Dietrich was screaming, high, terrified shrieks that didn't sound like they could come from a grown man who'd probably lived through the entire war. And underneath his screaming, I heard sounds of struggle, movement in the snow. The screams stopped after maybe 40 seconds. Then, while my hands gripped my desk hard enough to hurt, I heard breathing right up against the microphone. Heavy, congested, definitely not human. Something was examining the camera. The breathing moved away. Footsteps crunched in snow, fading into the distance. The footage ran for another 2 minutes, just the fallen camera filming tree trunks at an angle before cutting to black. I sat staring at my monitor, pulse hammering in my ears. My apartment was silent except for the rain and my own breathing. I checked the run time, 8 minutes 33 seconds. I watched it again and again. By the third viewing, I was taking notes. Freeze framing the section with the eyes shine, measuring the approximate height based on the tree trunks in frame, analyzing the audio waveform of that breathing. My clock read 2:14 a.m. before I stopped. Cubry was still under the couch. Smart cat, I should have gone to bed, should have waited until morning, gotten some sleep, approached this fresh. But I was already loading canister 2 into my restoration rig. This one was in slightly better condition. The transfer took 90 minutes. I made coffee while the software worked. Strong black from a bag I'd opened 3 weeks ago. It tasted like overcooked grounds. I drank it anyway. 3:47 a.m. I hit play on the second tape. Tape 2, Diesel the Pack. Date March 15, 1945. Duration 14 minutes 11 seconds. This footage opened with 4 men in military uniforms checking their weapons. They had 3 hunting dogs on heavy chains, big Dobermans, lean and aggressive looking. An officer, his insignia marked him as equivalent to a sergeant first class, briefed the camera. His name, I'd later learn, was Co. He spoke in clipped military German. I caught maybe every 5th word, but his gestures told the story clearly enough. He pointed at a map, then at the forest, then drew a finger across his throat in a cutting motion. They were going after whatever happened to Dietrich. The unit moved out at dawn. 12 days after the first footage, according to the date stamp in the corner, March 15, 1945, they found Dietrich's location within an hour. I'm not going to describe what the camera showed in detail. I've seen plenty of war footage in my career. Casualties, field medicine, things that would make most civilians uncomfortable. But this was different. The area showed clear signs of violence. The snow was disturbed across a 20 ft radius, dark stains frozen into the ground. One of the soldiers doubled over, clearly distressed. The dogs went absolutely insane. Not aggressive, terrified, barking, snarling, pulling so hard against their chains, I thought the handlers would lose control. One of the Dobermans, a big male, actually bit its own handler's arm trying to get free. The man shouted, "Let go." And the dog bolted back the way they'd come at a dead sprint. The other two dogs wouldn't stop howling, not the normal sound of dogs barking. This was high-pitched, panicked, primal fear. Code barked orders. The men formed up in a defensive line, rifles ready. They abandoned the remaining dogs, leaving them tied to trees where they continued their terrified chorus. The unit pushed deeper into the forest. The tracking sequence lasted 11 minutes, following prints in the snow, finding marks on trees where something had sharpened its claws, deep gouges in the bark that started 9 ft up the trunk. I measured using the soldiers as scale references. They found a cave. The entrance was partially concealed behind fallen rocks and dead brush, but the tracks led straight to it. The smell must have been overwhelming. Even through 80-year-old film, I could see soldiers covering their noses and mouths with cloth. Ko split his unit. 2 men stayed outside as guards. 2 entered the cave with the camera. The interior was shallow, maybe 60 ft deep. The camera's light source, probably a military flashlight, created harsh shadows and pools of absolute blackness that the weak beam couldn't penetrate. They found evidence immediately. Remains mixed with deer, wild boar, smaller animals, all showing signs of scavenging, methodical. Then one of the soldiers said something sharp, urgent, pointed at the cave wall. The camera focused, scratched into the stone. Crude but unmistakable were letters. English letters, "Stay out." I paused the footage, rewound, watched it again. English, carved into a cave wall in Germany. In March 1945, when the only English speakers in this part of Europe would have been Allied soldiers, and Allied soldiers didn't live in caves like this. The soldier in frame reached out to touch the carved letters. His hand was shaking. That's when I heard it through my headphones, a sound from deep in the cave, from the darkness beyond the flashlight's reach. A rumble, low, resonant, felt more than heard. The soldiers spun around, flashlights swinging wildly toward the back of the cave. For maybe 3 frames, I counted them later. The light caught something pulling back into the shadows, something massive and dark, moving with disturbing speed. Then it charged. The footage dissolved into complete chaos. Muzzle flashes strobing the darkness. The camera shaking violently, soldiers yelling in German, the barking of the abandoned dogs outside mixing with gunfire and other sounds. Impacts, movement, confusion. In the stuttering light of the muzzle flashes, I caught glimpses. Just fragments, dark fur, a massive limb, something moving on 2 legs, but hunched low, impossibly fast. One soldier went down with a shout that cut off abruptly, too abruptly. The camera operator ran. The image became a blur. Cave walls rushing past, then forest, branches whipping across the lens. He ran for 6 minutes straight. I timed it. 6 minutes of flat-out sprinting through dense forest, his breathing like a dying animal in my speakers. And behind him, faintly, I could hear something else running, keeping pace, not gaining, but not falling behind either. It was playing with him. He finally tripped. The camera fell into a shallow stream, landing lens up. The water was crystal clear. For just a second, I could see the operator's face reflected in the current. Young, maybe 25, eyes so wide, I could see white all around the irises. Then a shadow fell across the water. Something was standing over him. The camera captured it from below, a silhouette blotting out the gray sky. I could see the outline of a head, wrong-shaped and too large, tilting down as if examining prey. The soldier started speaking rapidly in German. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone, pleading, bargaining for his life. There was movement, a brief struggle. The reflection broke apart. The image went dark. The footage cut to black. I sat in my chair, coffee cold and forgotten in my hand, staring at the static on my screen. It was 5:33 a.m. Dawn was starting to gray my windows. I'd been watching for almost 2 hours without moving. My notes were scattered across my desk. Frame captures printed on my cheap inkjet. Audio waveforms, measurements, all of it trying to make logical sense of something that defied logic. Part of my brain, the part trained in historical documentation and film authentication, insisted this had to be fake propaganda footage. Psychological warfare meant to terrify Allied troops. Clever special effects from 1945, but I'd worked with enough genuine period footage to know the chemical breakdown of the emulsion was real. The physical damage patterns were consistent with 80 years of aging. The grain structure, the way light scattered through decades-old scratches on the film stock, you can't fake that, not convincingly, not to someone who knows what to look for. This was real film from 1945, which meant whatever it showed. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I needed to move, needed to process. I walked to my kitchen, really just a corner of the studio with a hot plate and mini fridge. Made fresh coffee. The thought of actual food seemed impossible. My stomach was a knot. While the coffee brewed, I did something I'd been avoiding. I pulled out my laptop and searched for information about the Harz Mountains in 1945. The results were extensive. The Harz region had been active in the final months of the war. Underground facilities, research projects, rumors of unusual experiments that most historians dismissed as Allied propaganda or post-war mythology. But what if some of it wasn't mythology? I found references to certain groups obsessed with archaeological and supernatural research. They'd operated extensively in the Harz Mountains, searching for proof of various theories through mystical artifacts and historical revisionism. Most serious historians considered them pseudoscientific nonsense used to justify terrible things. But what if they'd found something real? I searched for American servicemen missing in action from late 1944. The Battle of the Bulge had raged through December. Operation Northwind in January. The lists were staggering, thousands of names, men who'd vanished into winter forests and were never found. Most were presumed dead, bodies lost to snow and chaos. But what if some of them? I stopped that thought, poured my coffee, went back to my workstation, canister the three sat there waiting. I checked the time, 6:42 a.m. Wednesday morning. I'd been awake for over 32 hours. Every rational part of me said to sleep, shower, eat something substantial, approach this fresh. Instead, I loaded the third canister into my restoration rig. The transfer took longer than the previous two. The film stock was more damaged, moisture degradation sections where the emulsion had partially dissolved. I had to work carefully, frame by frame in some places, digitally reconstructing what time had tried to erase. 4 hours. By the time I had a viewable file, it was nearly 11:00 a.m. My hands trembled from too much caffeine and not enough food. My eyes felt like someone had rubbed them with sandpaper, but I couldn't stop. I closed the blinds, darkening my apartment, better to see the monitor clearly. I opened the file, took a breath, hit play. The third footage began differently. A man in a white coat stood facing the camera directly. Behind him, a makeshift laboratory, tables covered with equipment, maps pinned to wooden walls, the organized chaos of wartime scientific research. He was maybe 42, thin with wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. His posture was professorial, confident. When he spoke, his German was formal, measured, explaining something to an audience he assumed would understand the importance. An assistant held up a slate, Dr. Heinrich Voss, Research Division, the man who would try to capture a monster. And what I was about to learn would break something fundamental in how I understood the world. But I didn't know that yet. I just watched as Voss began to explain his plan, and I realized the horror was only beginning. Tape 3, Doerson Schlur, the scientist. Date March 28, 1945. Duration 19 minutes 55 seconds. Dr. Heinrich Voss spoke to the camera for almost 3 minutes straight. His German was formal, professorial, the kind you'd hear in a university lecture hall before the war turned everything into desperation. He stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back. Even through 80 years of degraded film, I could see the intensity in his eyes behind those wire-rimmed glasses. This was a man who believed completely in what he was doing. I caught scattered words as he spoke. Versigan. Failure tier, animal, sold, soldier, intelligence, intelligence, strategy, strategy, Gafang, Nama, capture. His tone told me everything. This wasn't fear talking. This was scientific fascination. The kind of obsessive curiosity that had driven him into whatever research division he belonged to. He gestured at papers spread on the table behind him. I could see diagrams, sketches of the creature based on previous encounters, detailed anatomical drawings showing estimated muscle structure, limb proportions, skeletal composition, measurements written in precise German script calculations. Voss had been studying the footage from the failed expeditions, analyzing every frame just like I was doing now, 80 years later. The slate appeared. Project Natsold, Dr. Expedition. Gafang Nama Fazuk, Project Night Soldier 3rd Expedition Capture Attempt. They weren't hunting anymore, they wanted it alive. Voss continued his briefing. He pointed at a map of the Harz region pinned to the wall, tracing routes with his finger. Red marks indicated where Dietrich had disappeared, where Coe's unit had been attacked, the cave where they'd found the English warning. He was mapping the creature's territory, identifying patterns. He drew a circle with his finger encompassing maybe 15 square miles of forest, the creature's hunting ground. Then he tapped a location near the center. His meaning was clear from gestures. This is where we make our stand. His final words before the footage cut were in English, heavily accented, but clear. For the record, maybe for whoever would eventually see this, previous failures derived from fundamental misunderstanding of subject's nature. This is not animal acting on instinct. This is soldier acting on training. We will approach accordingly. The footage cut to field preparation at dawn. 8 men assembled in what looked like an abandoned hunting lodge, each checking equipment, preparing methodically. 4 wore lab coats over military uniforms. Scientists, though they moved with military bearing. 4 in full combat gear, veterans who'd survived long enough to know what they were doing. Their equipment made me lean closer to my monitor. Alongside standard rifles, I saw modified tranquilizer equipment. Large bore delivery systems designed to punch through thick hide and deliver sedative deep into muscle tissue. Net launchers, Militarira compressed air cylinders providing launching force. Nets woven from steel cable and the cages. 3 of them each requiring 2 men to carry even empty steel construction bars thick as my thumb welded at every joint with reinforcing plates. Triple latch mechanisms on the doors. These weren't designed for ordinary animals. I watched as they tested one, 2 soldiers inside pushing against the bars with full weight. The cage didn't flex at all. They also assembled massive cable nets, 20 ft square woven from steel wire. The plan seemed to be stringing these between trees, creating barriers, channeling the creature's movement. Voss supervised everything personally, checking each piece, testing cage doors, examining net integrity. The syringes were enormous, each one the size of my forearm, filled with amber liquid. A scientist held one up to the camera. German text on the label indicated powerful sedative enough to incapacitate large, dangerous animals. Maybe enough to stop what was out there. Maybe. Voss gathered his team for final briefing. The camera captured everything. He spread a hand-drawn map on a wooden table, pointed at a clearing marked in red ink, explained the plan with gestures and rapid German. They would use bait, but this time, they wouldn't just wait passively. They would create a controlled zone. The cages positioned in a triangle around the clearing. Steel nets strung between trees on 3 approach routes they'd identified from studying the creature's previous attack patterns. 4 men in elevated blinds. Platforms built in trees, giving height advantage and clear fields of fire. 4 mobile on the ground, ready to respond wherever the creature appeared. It was impressive, professional. The kind of tactical planning you'd see in military operations. The problem was their enemy wasn't operating like a normal animal anymore. The deployment sequence began at dusk. They hiked to the clearing Voss had selected, roughly 2 mi from the previous cave site. The location was strategic, natural funnel points in terrain, limited approach routes, good sight lines, multiple camera angles as they set up. I could see meticulous care with every element. Cages positioned first, each placed and camouflaged with branches and snow. Not to hide them, Voss understood the creature was too intelligent for that, but to break up obvious geometry. Nets strung between massive pines, 20 ft up, angled to catch something tall, steel cables nearly invisible in fading light. The elevated blinds were already in place, built days earlier. Each platform had a rope ladder and firing positions. In the center of the clearing, they placed bait, a goat. The animal knew something was wrong. Animals always know. It bleated continuously, pulling against the rope, clearly distressed. The men took positions as full darkness fell. 4 in elevated blinds, 4 on the ground. Voss positioned himself with the ground team camera operator beside him. Multiple cameras recording now, overlapping coverage of the clearing, professional documentation, scientific observation. They waited. The time stamp started counting. 6:47 p.m. The goat's cries echoed through forest. 7:15 p.m. nothing but wind in trees. 8:33 p.m. one man in an elevated blind shifted position. Voss hissed something, probably telling him to stay still. 9:54 p.m. the goat's cries were now. 11:17 p.m. nothing. By midnight, I could see Voss's frustration, even through grainy night vision footage. The elevated cameras had some kind of low-light capability, everything rendered in shades of green and black. Voss conferred with one of his men and whispers, made a decision. 2 soldiers stepped into the clearing. They fired rifles into the air, 3 shots each. Muzzle flashes brilliant white in night vision. They shouted, challenges in German trying to provoke it. Nothing. The forest remained silent except for wind. The 2 soldiers backed out, returned to positions, more waiting. 1:45 a.m. According to time stamp, over 7 hours, I could see the men getting restless, small movements shifting weight. At 2:37 a.m., Voss made the call. They were packing it in. The men started to move carefully at first, still maintaining tactical awareness. That's when someone shouted. The camera whipped around, one man pointing behind them. One of the steel cages positioned north of the clearing, maybe 20 yards into terrain, was destroyed. Not triggered, not knocked over, destroyed. The camera rushed toward it. Footage bounced with movement, but when they reached the cage, it steadied. The bars were bent outward, not broken, bent. Someone had grabbed them and pulled, applying enough force to permanently deform thick steel. The welds had held, but the bars themselves had twisted. The cage door hung open at an impossible angle, and the cage had been empty, never baited, which meant the creature hadn't destroyed it trying to get food. It had destroyed it to send a message. Voss stood there staring. I could see his face in night vision. That green-tinted ghost image, his expression somewhere between awe and horror. He said something in German, quiet. The creature had been there all along, probably arrived within the first hour. Watched them set up, watched them wait, watched them grow frustrated. And while they focused on the clearing, on the bait, it had circled behind and destroyed one of their cages, not out of rage, to demonstrate how completely outmatched they were. Voss seemed to realize this. He started barking orders. Quick, urgent, men scrambled to gather equipment, no longer maintaining formation, just grabbing what they could carry. That's when the sound started. Footsteps in the forest, heavy, deliberate, not trying to be stealthy anymore. The camera caught multiple angles as men spun toward the sounds, weapons raised, but the footsteps were circling, moving around them, just outside range of lights and night vision. Then something flew out of darkness and hit the ground near the clearing. A branch thick as my arm snapped off a tree and thrown. Thunk, another one different direction, thunk, and another, thunk, thunk, thunk. They were being surrounded. The creature was throwing branches at them, casual playing. One soldier, younger, less experienced, started firing into trees. Muzzle flash lit up forest in strobing bursts. Voss shouted at him to stop, conserve ammunition, maintain discipline, but the psychological effect was clear. Then one of the elevated blinds reported movement. Radio crackled with urgent German. The camera pointed up. In night vision, I could see the blind 20 ft up in a massive pine, and above it, moving in branches even higher, a shape. The creature was in the trees. It had climbed above them, was literally looking down on their positions. The men in that blind opened fire. Camera caught muzzle flashes, bullets tearing through branches, but the shape was already moving, disappearing back into canopy. Then, from darkness beyond their perimeter, I heard it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up. Not a howl, not a roar, something between the two, deep, distorted. It was mocking them. Voss's face in night vision was pale. I could see comprehension there, understanding that they weren't dealing with an animal. They were dealing with something that understood exactly what they tried to do. He gave the order to retreat, not calmly, urgently, get out now. Men abandoned equipment, left cages, left nets, left everything they couldn't carry while running. But the creature wasn't done. As they fled back toward the lodge, it followed, not chasing, following, maintaining distance. And as it moved through forest parallel to them, it started destroying their equipment. Camera caught glimpses in bouncing night vision, cages being torn apart, nets being pulled down from trees, wooden blind collapsing as something hit its support tree. Methodical destruction. The sounds followed them all the way back. When they finally reached the lodge, all 8 accounted for miraculously. They barricaded the door. Camera captured their faces. Scientists and soldiers alike, breathing hard, eyes wide. They'd come to capture something extraordinary. They'd barely escaped, and all their equipment, thousands of Reichsmarks, was scattered through forest. Footage continued for another few minutes. Voss trying to maintain order, getting head count, checking for injuries. No one hurt, not even scratched. The creature could have attacked at any point, could have struck while distracted. It had chosen not to. The final shot was Voss's face in better light. Someone had lit a lantern. He stared directly at the camera. His expression was complex. Fear, yes, but also respect. He spoke in German first, then repeated in English. This is not animal, this is soldier. It uses tactics taught in military training. Ambush, psychological operations, demonstration of superior capability. He paused, removed glasses, and cleaned them with shaking hand. Previous failures were not failures of equipment or planning. They were failures of understanding. He put glasses back on. Whatever this creature was before, it remembers, it thinks, it plans. Another pause, and it was wearing an American uniform. The footage cut to black. I sat staring at my monitor. 11:47 a.m. Wednesday morning. The creature remembered, it thought, it planned. It had been a soldier once, American, based on that belt buckle. I pulled up my notes. Creature demonstrates advanced tactical thinking, uses psychological tactics. Could have attacked team but chose not to. Why? Destroyed equipment instead of personnel. Climbed trees, arrow capability. Voss confirms. Wearing American uniform and American soldier in Germany. In March 1945, the only Americans there would have been prisoners or men separated from units during winter fighting. I searched Battle of the Bulge, December 1944. Thousands of Americans missing. I found him. Corporal James Harker, 101st Airborne. Born April 3, 1921, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. MIA December 18, 1944. Near Strawborg, never found, 23 years old. I stared at his service photo. Young face, confident smile. He'd survived D-Day, survived Market Garden, survived the Bulge, then something in the woods got him. I loaded canister 4. The restoration took 3 hours. At 2:18 p.m. I pressed play. I pressed tape 4, die, Warhite, The Truth. Date April 10, 1945. Duration 23 minutes 8 seconds. Voss looked terrible. Thinner, dark circles beneath his eyes, several days of stubble, rumpled uniform. This wasn't the confident professor from before. This was a man who hadn't slept in 13 days. Behind him, equipment had changed. Better cameras, portable floodlights, more weapons, but also medical supplies, restraints. Still hoping to capture it, Voss spoke for 5 minutes. Voice hoarse, German coming in bursts. He gestured at documents. New maps, new diagrams, pages of notes. I caught key words. Master, pattern, territorium, territory. Verwund, injury, injury. Voss pointed at a new map section. Different area of forest farther north. He'd been tracking the creature over 13 days and he'd found something. The slate, final expedition, capture or elimination, authorization from command, 12 men, 6 with weapons, 3 in lab coats, 3 operating cameras. This wasn't science anymore. This was military operation with scientific oversight. Voss gave the briefing. His eyes kept darting to maps. His hands shook slightly. He was scared, but also excited. The scientist in him still fascinated. He switched to English for the camera. We believe the subject has been injured. It has retreated to a more defensible location. If our intelligence is correct, we may have our only opportunity. Pause for capture or documentation. The footage cut to the march. Professional documentation. Wide shots showing full team. They hiked deep 5 or 6 miles from the lodge into old-growth forest that looked primeval. Trees wider than I was tall. Dense canopy, snow still thick on ground. They followed territorial markings, scratches on trees, and deliberate patterns. The spacing became more frequent, more aggressive, deeper gouges. They were getting close. At 10:47 a.m., they found the second cave system. The entrance was massive, 12 ft high, carved by water over millennia. But someone had built a barrier. Stones deliberately piled, creating a wall. Carefully selected rocks fitted together, some weighing 200 lb or more. Architecture, deliberate construction. Voss examined it, gave orders. They started removing them. 20 minutes, men straining to move larger rocks. When they cleared enough space, the smell hit them. Even through 80-year-old film, I could see every man recoil, hands going to faces. Voss ordered floodlights forward. They illuminated the entrance. Voss entered first, camera right behind, then 2 soldiers, then rest of team in staggered formation. Professional, careful, weapons ready. The cave extended deep, floodlights pushed back. Darkness, revealing tunnels spiraling downward, natural formation worn smooth. Walls covered with scratches, territorial marks layered over each other. Years of them, decades. How long had something been living here? They descended. The timestamp showed 3 minutes going down into Earth. At the bottom, a chamber enormous, maybe 80 ft across, ceiling lost in shadows. The floor was covered with organic material, moss, leaves, fabric. The camera panned. German uniforms, American uniforms, remnants of insignia, mostly deteriorated, but still recognizable. Arranged deliberately, laid out flat, overlapping, creating a nest around the perimeter. Evidence of long-term habitation, not scattered, organized, methodically arranged. Voss approached slowly, knelt, examined. I watched his face in harsh floodlight, saw realization dawn. These weren't trophies. They were arranged respectfully, reverently. A memorial, one scientist called out. Voss moved to where the man pointed. Metal objects in an alcove. Camera zoomed. Dog tags, maybe a dozen pairs. Voss picked them up with gloved hands. Read each name to the camera. Voice shaking. Corporal James Harker, 101st Airborne U.S. Army. Private First Class Robert Ken, 82nd Airborne U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant William Mock, 101st Airborne U.S. Army. 6 American soldiers, all MIA between December 1944 and February 1945, all paratrooper units, all disappeared near Strawberg. Voss stood holding the tags. I saw something in his face I'd never seen before in the footage. Grief, not for his own men, but for these American kids who'd survived so much only to disappear into these mountains. Then a sound from deeper in the cave. Wet, labored, breathing, struggling, every man froze. Floodlights swung toward the back, an alcove there. Something was inside. Voss spoke quietly, gave orders. His men spread out in semicircle, weapons raised, cameras positioned, professional, controlled. They approached the alcove. The creature was there, not attacking, not threatening, injured badly. Floodlights showed evidence of trauma on its left side. A significant wound, breathing labored, each inhale rattling, pressed against the back wall, as far from entrance as it could get. Not trying to flee, just waiting. Eyes tracked the humans, yellow, but with awareness that was unmistakably human. Voss ordered cameras closer. They moved in 10 ft, 5 ft. I could see details now. The face was a combination of features. The bone structure underneath suggested human origins trying to assert themselves through animal characteristics. Body covered in dark fur, growing in irregular patches. Visible scars underneath in places, years of damage visible. This thing had been suffering for a long time. Voss said something, a question in German. The creature's ears twitched, focused on Voss. Then its eyes closed briefly, opened again. Acknowledgement, it understood. Voss spoke again, slower, voice gentle. The creature opened its mouth. What came out was barely recognizable as speech. Vocal cords weren't designed for it. Throat was wrong shape. Every sound forced, but it was English. Stop this, please. Wet, rasping, thick with pain, make it stop. Every man reacted. One camera operator stepped back, hands shaking. These were experienced military personnel. They'd seen combat, but nothing prepared them for this. The creature continued, each word costing effort. Can't control, pause, wet breathing, hurts every day, so hungry, can't stop. Voss found his voice, barely a whisper. You are James Harker. The creature's eyes closed, opened, small nod. Yes, how long have you been like this? The creature tried to raise one hand, too long, proportions wrong. It tried to show months. The hand shook, dropped. Since our den's December thought 3 weeks, but time, losing track of time, days blending, so long. Voss leaned forward. What happened? What did this to you? The creature's body shuddered, eyes widened with terror. Something in the woods near Strawborg. Voice dropped lower. Patrol December. We saw, it stopped. Breathing hard, wound clearly causing pain. Thought it needed help. We went. It was bigger, so much bigger. Moved so fast, it bit me. Felt bones break. Thought I was dying. Woke up 3 days later, already changing. Voss's voice steady now. The bite, can you show me? The creature hesitated, then shifted. Moved fur on right shoulder aside. Camera zoomed in. A scar massive, fully healed, but tissue thick, raised, the pattern unmistakable. A bite mark huge. One scientist stepped forward with measuring tools, started documenting, calling out numbers. Jaw span 8.3 in. Estimated dental impressions suggest significantly large predator. Voss stared at the measurements. This wound is 4 months old. Harker disappeared December 18th. It's now April 10th. He looked at the scientist. Compare these measurements to the subject. The scientist hesitated, pulled out notebook, compared the jaw that created this wound was significantly larger than the subject's current structure. Estimated 30 to 40% larger. Voss turned back to Harker. What bit you? It was bigger than what you became. Harker's eyes opened. Terrible clarity. Much bigger. Old. So old, it spoke. Voss leaned forward. It spoke. It could communicate. Yes, German. Old German said it was sorry, said it didn't want to but curse. Curse is hungry, voice fading. It said curse passes through blood, through bite, waits for war. Voss tried to ask more, but Harker's condition worsened. Body spasmed, muscles contracting, sound of distress. The transformation was unstable, fighting itself, caught between states with no relief. Soldiers raised weapons. Voss pulled radio from belt, spoke rapidly. Response crackled back. Orders from command. War ending. Project shutting down. Conclude the operation. Document everything. Voss stood holding the radio, looking at Harker, looking at the dog tags. 6 American soldiers. Kids. Harker managed to speak. Please end this. I couldn't save them. He was crying, tears running from yellow eyes. Tried to help them. Touched them, trying to stop the change. Curse passed anyway. Couldn't save them. Please, no more. Voss looked at his men. He made a decision, nodded. Schnell, make it quick. 6 men raised weapons. I wanted to look away, but I owed it to Harker to witness. They did what needed to be done. The sound was brief, final. When they stopped, silence was absolute. Harker's suffering ended. Voss approached, confirmed, looked at camera. It's over. The footage continued. Voss ordered examination. Documentation for command. Camera moved in. The scientist documented methodically. The transformation caught mid-shift. Skeletal structure altered in ways that shouldn't be possible. Then he returned to that shoulder wound, measured again, more carefully, took tissue samples, preserved them. Voss watched. The scarring indicates the bite occurred approximately 16 weeks ago. The scientist reported the jaw that inflicted this was substantially larger than the subject. The creature that bit Corporal Harker had jaw span of at least 9 in. This is not the source. This is a victim of something far more dangerous. Voss absorbed this, looked around the cave at organized space, collected dog tags, nest made from uniforms. He kept them, Voss said quietly, the men he lost. He kept their remains, tried to honor them. He picked up the dog tags again. He was still human, still a soldier, even transformed. He tried to hold on to that. The scientist asked, "What do we do with this information?" Voss was quiet for a long time. "Then we document it. Command is collapsing. War is over in days. This project ends here. We handle this respectfully. Close this cave. The creature that infected Harker, the original, is still out there somewhere, but we are out of time." He looked at camera one last time. If someone finds this footage in the future, they need to understand James Harker was not a monster. He was a victim. The real danger is still in these mountains, and it has been here for a very long time. Final minutes showed respectful conclusion. They sealed everything. Collapsed entrance. Last shot was outside. April morning light. Forest quiet. Voss stood in front of camera. This is the final record of Project Naktat. The war is ending. This research is concluded. Voice empty. To anyone who finds this, we did not create what we found. We merely documented it, and what created it remains unknown. Pause. James Harker, James. Corporal 101st Airborne U.S. Army died April 10, 1945 in the Harz Mountains. May he finally rest. The footage ended. I sat unable to move. Thursday, 6:47 p.m. James Harker, 23, from Iowa. 4 months trapped, conscious the whole time, watching himself, unable to save the men around him, unable to control what the curse brought, asking for relief, finally receiving it. I thought about his family, parents who'd gotten MIA telegram, who spent their lives wondering they'd never know the truth. Maybe that was better. I looked at my workbench. 1 canister left, D-end, classified, destroy after viewing, April 15, 1945, 5 days after Harker's passing, 2 days before war ended. What was on this tape? My hands trembled loading it. The restoration began 6 hours, worst condition yet. 7:03 p.m. when I started, I tried to rest, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harker's face, heard his voice. "Stop this, please," couldn't save them. At 12:47 a.m. Friday morning, my computer chimed. The final tape was ready. I sat down, hands steady now. Whatever was on this tape, I needed to see it. I pressed play, tape 5, D-end, the end. Date April 15, 1945. Duration 31 minutes 47 seconds. The footage opened in the same bunker laboratory, but everything looked different now. Hasty, desperate. Voss was alone with the camera. No assistants, no soldiers visible. He looked terrible, like he'd aged 20 years in 5 days, disheveled uniform, bloodshot eyes, hands shaking as he arranged papers. He spoke directly to the lens. Rapid German, urgent, but I caught enough. Command had collapsed 2 days ago. The war was over in everything but official declaration. His unit had been ordered to evacuate, destroy all research, disappear before Allied forces arrived. This was his last recording. He spread maps across the table, pointed to locations marked in red ink. His finger tapped a spot about 5 mi north. Bazia, and after Anala, based on analysis of the bite pattern and behavioral tracking, he was tracking something, the creature that had infected Harker. The footage cut to field operation. 20 men this time, every remaining soldier Voss could assemble. They carried more equipment than all previous expeditions combined. This wasn't research anymore. This was about confronting something before they all scattered. They marched through the night. Camera work shaky, hurried. No time for proper documentation. They reached the cave at 11:37 p.m. The entrance was massive, 12 ft high, worn smooth by ancient water. The darkness beyond looked absolute. Voss gave orders. 4 men stayed outside. The rest entered. The tunnel descended in a spiral, 200 ft down. The walls covered in scratch marks layered over each other. Years of them, decades, they reached the chamber, enormous, 80 ft across, floor covered with evidence of long habitation. Thousands of markers. Some of them looked very old, deteriorated in ways suggesting decades of occupation. Whatever lived here had been here for a very long time. One scientist examined the wall, called Voss over excitedly. Scratches in the stone, not random deliberate patterns, symbols repeated. Then Voss pointed at the far wall, more scratches, different tally marks, hundreds of them, organized in groups of 5. Someone had been counting, keeping track of time for decades. That's when I heard it through the speakers, sound from the tunnel, something coming down fast. Heavy footsteps echoing, growing louder. Voss shouted orders. Men scrambled into position, weapons raised. The creature entered the chamber. It was massive. 9 feet tall, maybe more. Shoulders 4 feet across, covered in dark fur, matted with gray, marked from countless encounters. The head was ancient, primal intelligence in those yellow eyes that was unmistakable and terrible. Around its neck, a chain, military issue, oxidized and old. Hanging from it were dog tags, American dog tags. The creature stood at the tunnel entrance, completely still, studying the humans who'd invaded its home. 8 full seconds of assessment. Then one soldier, nervous, trigger-happy, fired. The impact hit the creature's shoulder. It looked down at the wound, then back at the soldier. The expression on its face was almost disappointed. Then it moved. The creature crossed 20 ft in what looked like a single motion, reached the soldier, disarmed him, incapacitated him with minimal force. The man went down but wasn't seriously harmed. The other soldiers reacted. The chamber filled with chaos. The creature was fast enough to avoid most of it, but not all. Some impacts connected. It made sounds of pain, but it didn't retreat. It defended itself. 90 seconds of intense confrontation. The creature moved through soldiers methodically, disabling threats, targeting weapons first, intelligent tactics, each movement efficient, practiced. It wasn't fighting with rage. It was fighting with military precision. The confrontation ended with Voss and 2 soldiers backed against the wall, their weapons gone, surrounded by incapacitated colleagues. The creature stood in the center, showing signs of injury, breathing heavy but controlled. It looked at Voss, and Voss somehow found his voice. Waram, why? You were human once. Why? The creature tilted its head, the gesture disturbingly human, curious, almost gentle. It approached Voss slowly, lowered itself until they were face to face. Voss was shaking. The camera captured terror barely held in check. The creature opened its mouth, spoke. The voice was deeper than Harker's had been, more practiced at forcing human words through an inhuman throat, accented German. Mensch Verlangardite, I was human a long time ago. Voss whispered, how long? The creature closed its eyes. 1871, Franco-Russian. The Franco-Russian War 74 years ago. Voss's face went white. That's impossible. The creature touched the dog tags around its neck. Careful, almost reverent. American 1918, Grand Gare. He came to me dying. Voice broke slightly. I tried to save him. Curse passed. Words came slower now, heavy with grief. I did not want to pass it again, but war brings dying men. I smell death. I cannot stop. The creature looked at Voss with an expression I never thought I'd see on such a face, pleading, how many have I made? Voss, trembling, we found one Harker, American soldier. The creature's eyes closed. A sound from its throat, not a growl, something that sounded like grief. I remember I smelled his wound, tried to help. Curse is hunger, hunger is curse. Then I saw it, moisture in one yellow eye. It was crying. Voss whispered, what do you want? The creature pulled back, looked at what had happened, men down but alive around it. War ending, I feel it. Maybe I can sleep now. Maybe curse sleeps with war. It looked at Voss one last time. Tell no one, let me be forgotten. It turned toward the tunnel. Voss called out, wait, your name? What was your name? The creature stopped, didn't turn around. Long pause, then Wilhelm, Aya Wilhelm, and it disappeared into darkness. Sound of footsteps echoing up the tunnel, growing fainter, fainter. Silence, Voss collapsed against the wall. The 2 conscious soldiers stood in shock around them. Their colleagues were beginning to stir, injured but alive. The creature had shown restraint even in self-defense. The footage cut to 3 days later. Same bunker, Voss alone. He looked worse, somehow broken. He spoke to the camera in English for posterity. Command has collapsed. The war is over. Officially, Project Nakodat never existed. Voice flat, emotionless. Wilhelm disappeared into the mountains. We found no trace. Harker was the only infected we confirmed. There may be others. He looked directly at camera. This footage will be sealed. If someone finds this in the future, understand Wilhelm was not a monster. He was a man cursed by compassion. Hands shaking, he clasped them together. He tried to save dying soldiers. The curse passed through the attempt to heal. 74 years of consciousness trapped in that form. 74 years of accidentally infecting those he tried to save. He looked down. We ended Harker's suffering, but Wilhelm is still out there. And if the war truly is over, perhaps he can finally rest. Pause. Or perhaps the next war will wake him again. Last words barely a whisper. God forgive us for creating wars that feed such curses. He reached forward. Screen went black, but audio continued 12 more seconds. Voss was crying quietly. Then the footage truly ended. I sat staring at the black screen. Wilhelm, German soldier from 1871, cursed for 74 years, trying to save lives and spreading infection instead. Harker, one victim in a chain stretching back decades. How many others was Wilhelm still out there? It was Friday, 1:35 a.m. I'd been awake for days. I needed to compile the files, send them to that PO box in Montana, complete the job. I stood up, stretched. My body itched. That's when my apartment door burst open. I barely had time to turn before they were inside. Men in tactical gear, moving with military precision. Hands, show me your hands. I raised them, stumbling backward, knocking my chair over. 6 men flooded my studio. Dark uniforms, no visible insignia, faces covered. They spread out efficiently. One went straight to my computers, another to the film canisters. A third started photographing everything. Michael Wren on the ground now. The voice came from the doorway. A man in his 50s, gray hair, dressed in a suit. He stepped over my damaged door. Who? What is this ground now? I complied. Cold hardwood against my face, hands pulled my arms behind my back, zip ties secured around my wrists. The suited man walked to my workstation, looked at my screens at the frozen final frame of Voss's face. Impressive work, he said. Clean restoration. Better than expected. Under what authority? He pulled out identification, federal credentials, but the specific agency information was redacted. Authority sufficient. He nodded to his men. Secure everything. Computers, drives, original canisters, every backup. They moved efficiently, disconnecting equipment, packing it into cases. My entire professional life disappearing. The tapes, the man said, crouching next to me. How much did you watch? I want legal representation. You're not under arrest yet. Answer the question. All of them, he nodded. Good, saves time. He stood. Bring him. 2 men hauled me to my feet, walked me toward the door. Wait, where? What is this? The suited man looked at me, eyes cold. Professional. You saw something that isn't supposed to exist. That makes you a liability. I didn't tell anyone. We know. We've been monitoring you since Tuesday. That vehicle outside. The odd phone call. They'd been watching the whole time. This was a test, I said. He almost smiled. Yes, for what? To see if you could restore sensitive material without compromising it. Without breaking, he gestured at my apartment. You passed. They walked me down the stairs. A dark SUV waited on the street. Early morning in Portland, and nobody looked at the men loading me into a vehicle. Or maybe they looked and decided it wasn't their problem. My cat, I said as they pushed me into the back seat. I have a cat. The suited man sliding in next to me. We'll arrange care. Where are we going? You have 2 options, Mr. Wren. His voice was calm. Matter of fact, option 1, you work for us. Sign the paperwork, help us with a project. And option 2, you're charged with possession of stolen classified materials. The tapes were taken from a federal archive in 1982. Possessing them carries serious penalties. I stared at him. You sent them to me, prove it. He shrugged. The PO box is a dead end. Payment was cash. No paper trail. This is coercion. Yes, but it's also an opportunity. The SUV started moving. Portland sliding past tinted windows. You saw Wilhelm, Harker. You know they're real. He pulled out a tablet, showed me files, hundreds of them. 419 cataloged since 1947, 60% in degraded analog format. We need someone who can restore them, someone who can work under absolute secrecy. He looked at me. You're alone, divorced, no family, financially desperate, obsessive about your work. Perfect candidate. And if I refuse, significant legal consequences, years of prosecution. I looked out the window, watched my city disappear, thought about Wilhelm, alive for 74 years with a curse he couldn't control. Thought about Hey, their travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now, let's begin our journey into the unknown. I was trained to read rocks, not nightmares, but the video file Justin sent me 2 weeks ago changed that. The timestamp said January 9th, 2025, 11:47 p.m. The footage was corrupted, pixels bleeding into each other, audio cutting in and out like someone was drowning the signal. My brother's face appeared for maybe 3 seconds. Gaunt, eyes too wide, frost in his beard. Anders don't come, static. But if you do, more static than clear as glass. Norrelk beneath the school. The video ended. I played it 17 times that night, sitting in my apartment in Denver, staring at the frozen frame of Justin's face. He looked terrified. Not the kind of scared you get from finding something interesting in the field, the kind that hollows you out from the inside. My brother had been missing for 2 weeks. The last confirmed sighting was January 8th. A gas station attendant in Judica remembered him buying supplies. Bottled water, freeze-dried meals, rope. After that, nothing. The Russian authorities weren't helpful. Missing foreign researchers weren't high priority, especially ones chasing cryptids in Siberia. They told me to file a report and wait. I didn't wait. By January 23rd, I was on a cargo flight to Norrelk with Ethan Evanson and Dr. Ava Birdall. Ethan I'd known since college, wilderness instructor, former EMT, the kind of guy who could start a fire in a blizzard with wet matches. Ava was Justin's contact, a linguist who'd worked with him on 3 previous expeditions. She had sharp eyes and a way of looking at things that made you think she saw more than she let on. We didn't talk much on the flight. The engine noise made conversation impossible anyway, but I caught Ava staring at her tablet twice, scrolling through something that made her jaw tighten. When I asked what she was reading, she just shook her head. Later, she said, Norilsk appeared below us like a wound in the tundra. Smoke from the nickel plants stained the sky gray. The city sprawled across permafrost, a Soviet relic that refused to die. But we weren't going to the city. We were going 10 km east to a place that didn't exist on any map. The mining town had no name, just coordinates. 69, 4521, 4521 degree and 882, ends 34E. The pilot dropped us at a makeshift aerostrip, really just a flat stretch of frozen ground, and promised to return in 72 hours. If we weren't there, he wasn't coming back. I paid him an American cash. He didn't count it, just shoved the bills into his jacket and took off without another word. The wind hit us the moment the plane disappeared over the horizon. Sub-zero, air that bit through 3 layers of insulation and found skin. Anyway, my breath crystallized before it left my mouth. Ethan adjusted his pack and pointed northeast. 2 hours on foot, he said, maybe 3 in this wind. We walked. The landscape was white and gray and nothing else. Flat tundra stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional ridge of exposed rock. No trees, no birds, just wind threading through the emptiness, carrying the smell of diesel and something underneath it, something older, rot and metal and ozone. Ava walked beside me, her face buried in a scarf, eyes on the GPS unit in her gloved hand. Every few minutes, she'd check our heading and adjust course. She didn't speak. None of us did. The cold made conversation painful, and besides, what was there to say? We were walking into a ghost town, looking for a man who'd sent a cryptic video and then vanished. The first building appeared after 90 minutes. A watchtower listing to one side, its windows shattered. The structure leaned like it was trying to escape the ground. Rust had eaten through the metal supports, leaving gaps where wind howled through. Then more buildings, rows of them. Soviet-era housing blocks, their facades cracked and peeling, vehicles frozen in the streets. Trucks with flat tires, a bus with its door hanging open, everything covered in a thin layer of frost that made it look like the town had been dipped in glass. But no bodies, no skeletons, no signs of violence, just emptiness. They left in a hurry, Ethan said, his voice muffled by his balaclava. He was looking at a building where the front door stood open. Inside, I could see a table set for dinner, plates still in place, cups overturned. Ava stopped in the middle of the street, turning in a slow circle. This doesn't make sense. Mining towns don't get abandoned overnight. There should be records, notices, something. Maybe there are, I said, just not in English. She gave me a look that said I was missing the point. Anders, I read Russian. I've been through Soviet archives. This place doesn't exist in any of them. Not officially. Black site, Ethan suggested. Maybe, but for what? We kept moving deeper into the town toward the center where the buildings clustered tighter. The wind faded as we entered the maze of structures, replaced by a silence that felt wrong, not peaceful, expectant, like something was holding its breath. The school was exactly where Justin's video had indicated, a 3-story concrete block with Cyrillic letters above the entrance. Most of them had fallen off, leaving gaps like missing teeth. The front doors were sealed, but a side entrance had been forced open, fresh marks in the ice recent. Justin was here, I said. Ethan nodded. Within the last few days, judging by the ice formation, maybe less. We went inside. The hallway smelled like mildew and old paper. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, illuminating rows of lockers, their doors hanging open. Classrooms branched off to either side, desks still in neat rows, chalkboards covered in equations that no one would ever solve. Ava stopped at one of the classrooms, shining her light on the wall. Someone had spray-painted symbols there, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Not Cyrillic, not any language I recognized. Ava, I said. She was staring at the symbols, her face pale. I've seen these before. Once in a document I translated for a private collector, Soviet Archaeological Survey from 1967, they found similar markings at a dig site near the Ural Mountains. The report was classified within a week. What did it say? She hesitated. The literal translation was Warden of the Breach. But the context suggested something else, something about anchors, dimensional anchors. Ethan and I exchanged a glance. Dimensional anchors. Justin had mentioned something similar in one of his last emails, a theory about places where reality wore thin, where the boundaries between worlds became permeable. I dismissed it as another one of his cryptid theories. Now I wasn't so sure. We found the stairs leading down at the end of the hallway, a metal door reinforced with a wheel locked like something from a submarine. It hung open. The lock mechanism sheared off with a cutting torch. Scorch marks blackened the metal. Justin's work. I recognized his methods. The stairs descended into absolute darkness. Our flashlights barely penetrated it, the beams swallowed by gloom that seemed thicker than air should be. The temperature dropped with each step, not gradually, all at once, like passing through a membrane. By the time we reached the bottom, frost had formed on my eyelashes. The corridor ahead was wrong. The walls were concrete, but the concrete was wrong. Too smooth in some places, rough in others, like it had been poured at different times by different people who didn't care about consistency. Exposed rebar jutted from the ceiling in patterns that made no architectural sense. And the floor was stone, not concrete. Stone carved with more of those symbols worn smooth by centuries of use. This can't be right, Ethan said. His voice echoed strangely, like the corridor was longer than it appeared. The school was built in the 50s. This stonework is ancient. Ava knelt, running her gloved fingers over the symbols. Pre-Cyrillic, maybe pre-Christian. These markings are older than any settlement in this region should be. We followed the corridor. It branched, then branched again, forming a labyrinth that shouldn't exist under a small town school. Motion sensors flickered on as we passed, casting pools of sickly yellow light that made the shadows deeper. Some of the sensors were modern, others looked like they'd been installed during the Cold War. The technology didn't match. Nothing matched. Then we found the skeletons. They were chained to the walls in a side chamber, 7 of them arranged in a circle. Their bones were yellowed and brittle, but the chains were new. Stainless steel, industrial grade. Someone had chained these people here recently and left them to die. Ava covered her mouth. Oh God. Ethan checked the chains, his EMT training kicking in automatically, even though there was nothing to save. No sign of struggle. They just sat here, waited. For what? I asked. No one answered. We kept moving because stopping meant thinking about those skeletons, and thinking about them meant asking questions we didn't want answered. The corridor opened into a larger space, a junction where 4 passages met. In the center stood a pillar covered in symbols, glowing faintly with bioluminescent paint that hadn't faded despite decades underground. Ava photographed everything, her hands shaking. This is impossible. The linguistic drift alone, these symbols span at least 3,000 years. Some of them are Proto-Indo-European. Others are I don't know what they are. Which way? Ethan asked. I closed my eyes and tried to remember Justin's video. The background, the lighting, he'd been somewhere with metal walls and a low ceiling, somewhere that hummed there, I said, pointing to the left passage. I think he went that way. We descended again. Stairs cut directly into bedrock, spiraling down into depths that made my head spin. The hum grew louder, not a mechanical sound, but something organic, like a heartbeat slowed to near stopping. The air changed, too, becoming viscous, clinging to skin like oil. At the bottom of the stairs, we found the door. It was massive, 3 m tall, 2 m wide, made from metal that reflected our flashlights in colors metal shouldn't reflect. The surface was covered in those symbols, arranged in spiral patterns that seemed to move when I looked at them directly. And around the door, gouged into the floor, were drag marks, human-sized, leading inward. Ethan put his hand on the door. It's warm. Don't touch it, Ava said, but it was too late. The door began to open. Not mechanically, not with the grinding of gears or the hiss of hydraulics. It simply opened like it had been waiting for us, like it wanted us inside. Beyond the door was a chamber, circular, maybe 30 m across. The walls were lined with equipment, computers from different eras, all running, all connected by cables that snaked across the floor in patterns that hurt to follow. Some of the machines looked like they were from the 1970s. Others were cutting edge. All of them hummed with that same organic rhythm. And in the center of the chamber, suspended in a cylinder of thick liquid, was the creature. It was humanoid. Roughly 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head, but the proportions were wrong. The limbs too long, the joints bending in directions that suggested extra articulation points. Its skin was translucent, like looking at something through frosted glass, revealing structures underneath that weren't quite bones, weren't quite organs. Its eyes were closed. Around the base of the cylinder were more skeletons. These ones chained in positions of agony, their mouths open in silent screams, and sitting in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, was a person alive, breathing, staring at nothing. Jesus Christ, Ethan whispered. I moved closer to the cylinder. The liquid inside was viscous, almost gel-like, with tendrils of something darker suspended in it. The creature floated in the center, perfectly still. No breathing, no movement, but I could feel it. Some part of my brain that evolution had wired for danger was screaming at me to run. Ava was at one of the computers, her fingers flying over a keyboard. This is a containment system. Multiple redundancies, life support, neural suppression. They've been keeping it sedated for decades, maybe longer. Who's they? Ethan asked. Soviet researchers initially, but the logs show activity up to last week. Someone's been maintaining this. I looked at the person in the corner. They hadn't moved, hadn't acknowledged our presence. I approached slowly, hands visible, trying not to startle them. Hey, I said softly, can you hear me? No response. I got closer, close enough to see their face. Young, maybe early 20s, eyes open, but not seeing, breathing shallow, skin waxy and pale. They were alive, but barely, like someone had scooped out everything that made them human and left only the machinery running. That's when I heard it. A voice not spoken, not in my ears, inside my head. Finally, I spun back to the cylinder. The creature's eyes were open. They were gold, metallic, reflective, and they were looking directly at me. You came. The voice was everywhere and nowhere. Multiple tones layered over each other, harmonizing in ways that made my teeth ache. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't move. My breath stuttered, my chest locked. The creature's hand pressed against the inside of the cylinder. Slowly, deliberately, I've been waiting. The lights in the chamber began to flicker, not randomly, in sequence, like something was counting down. The computers sparked, their screens filling with cascading errors. The liquid in the cylinder began to churn. "We need to leave," Ava said, her voice tight with panic. "Now we need to leave now," but it was too late. The creature's eyes brightened and the world inverted. The lights didn't go out. They turned inside out, pulling darkness from the walls and spilling it across the floor like liquid. The humming stopped, replaced by a sound like breaking glass stretched across minutes. And the floor disappeared. We fell, not down, not exactly, in a direction that didn't have a name, through layers of reality that peeled away like skin, each one showing us something worse underneath. I saw Ethan screaming but couldn't hear him, saw Ava reaching for me but couldn't touch her, saw the chamber twist into impossible geometries, the walls folding through dimensions my eyes couldn't process. And through it all, I heard Justin's voice, distant, terrified, calling my name. We fell through the floor into somewhere else, somewhere wrong. When I opened my eyes, the sky was bleeding, not metaphorically. The sky above us was the wrong color, a deep purple that pulsed like a bruise with veins of light threading through it like capillaries. The air tasted like copper and ozone, and in the distance, buildings rose and melted into each other, their architecture defying physics, walls meeting at angles that shouldn't exist. We were still in Siberia, sort of, but this wasn't our Siberia. Ethan was on his hands and knees vomiting. Ava was standing, Ava turning in slow circles, her face paper white. I got to my feet, my legs shaking, my mind trying to process what it was seeing and failing. "Where are we?" Ethan gasped. "Not where," Ava whispered. "When, or maybe not even that." She didn't finish, because from somewhere in the twisted cityscape ahead, we heard it. A scream, human, male, familiar, Justin, and underneath his scream something else, footsteps, too many joints moving fast. The creature was here. The scream came again, closer this time, and I was running before my brain caught up with my legs. "Anders, wait," Ethan's voice behind me, but I didn't stop. That was Justin, my brother. The one I'd refused to help 2 weeks ago when he'd asked me to come with him. The one I'd told to stop chasing shadows and get a real job. The one I'd failed. Not again. The ground beneath my feet felt wrong. Soft in places, hard in others, like running across a surface that couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. Buildings rose around us, their walls flowing like wax, windows appearing and disappearing as I passed. The sky pulsed overhead, that bruised purple deepening to black at the edges, veins of light threading through it in patterns that made my vision blur. Ava caught up to me, grabbing my arm. "Stop, just stop. We don't know what's out there. Justin's out there." And running blind toward him helps how exactly. Her grip tightened. "Look around, Anders, really look." I did. The buildings weren't just melting into each other. They were wrong on a fundamental level. A structure to my left had windows on all 6 sides, but it only had 4 walls. Another building curved up and over itself, its roof meeting its foundation in a loop that violated geometry. And in the distance, I could see movement. Shapes that might have been buildings or might have been something else, shifting and reorganizing themselves like pieces on a board no one was playing. "This place isn't stable," Ava said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "It's like someone took our reality and broke it. Folded it wrong." Ethan joined us, his face gray. "My compass is spinning. GPS is dead. Even the sun." He pointed up at the sky where a light source hung that might have been a sun, but pulsed arrhythmically, fading and brightening without pattern. "I can't navigate this." Another scream, Justin's voice, raw with terror, coming from somewhere ahead and to the right, or maybe behind us. The sound echoed strangely, bouncing off surfaces that shouldn't exist, arriving from multiple directions at once. We follow the buildings, I said. Stay together. Mark our path. Mark it with what? Ethan asked. I pulled out my climbing chalk, a habit from my geology days. This. We moved forward and I marked every corner, every intersection, drawing arrows that pointed back the way we'd come. The chalk glowed faintly against the impossible architecture, like the symbols in the bunker. Maybe that meant something, maybe it didn't, but it was all we had. The city, if you could call it that, was a maze of Soviet-era buildings twisted into nightmare configurations. I recognized apartment blocks, their balconies hanging at angles that would send furniture sliding into empty air. A playground where the swings hung upside down, chains extending up into nowhere. A market square where the cobblestones rippled like water frozen midwave. And everywhere that smell, sulfur and wet stone, and something floral that had gone to rot. It coated the back of my throat, made my eyes water. There, Ava whispered, pointing. A figure stood in the middle of an intersection ahead, human-shaped, perfectly still, watching us. My heart seized. Justin, no response. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. We approached slowly, weapons ready. Ethan had his fixed-blade knife. I had my ice axe. Ava had a flare gun from her pack. Not much, but it was something. As we got closer, I realized my mistake. It wasn't a person, it was a shadow. A human-shaped absence of light standing in a pool of brightness, and when I looked at it directly, it flickered. Here one moment, gone the next, like a frame skipped in a film. Don't look at it, Ava said, just don't. We skirted around it, giving it a wide berth. The shadow turned to follow our movement, but its feet never moved. It simply rotated, tracking us with eyeless attention until we rounded a corner and it was gone. What the hell was that? Ethan asked. I don't know, Ava said, but I think we just saw ourselves. That wasn't us. No, but it was us a few minutes ago or a few minutes from now. Time isn't. She trailed off, shaking her head. Time isn't linear here. We kept moving, marking our path, following the sound of Justin's voice when it came. But the screams were getting farther apart now, weaker, like he was running out of strength to make noise. The buildings began to change as we went deeper. The Soviet architecture gave way to older structures, wooden buildings that might have been from Tsarist Russia. Their facades carved with Orthodox crosses and symbols I didn't recognize. Then older still stone buildings with no right angles, their walls covered in the same markings we'd seen in the bunker. This isn't random, Ava said, photographing everything with shaking hands. It's archaeological, like someone took different eras and stacked them on top of each other. Or like different eras are bleeding through, I said. We turned a corner and found the first body, a woman, mid-30s, dressed in a Soviet military uniform. She was sitting against a wall, legs stretched out in front of her, arms resting in her lap. At first, I thought she might be alive. Her posture was too natural, too relaxed. But when we got closer, I saw her face. Her eyes were open, but milky white. Her skin had a waxy quality, like she'd been preserved, and her mouth was frozen in a smile. Not a grimace, an actual smile. What the hell? Ethan knelt beside her, checking for a pulse out of habit. No rigor mortis, no decomposition. It's like she died seconds ago. But that uniform is from the 50s. Ava was examining the symbols painted on the wall behind the body. These are fresh, recently painted. She was here when she trailed off touching the paint. It came away wet on her fingers. She painted these before she died. What do they say? I asked. It showed me home, Ava translated. That's why she's smiling. Whatever killed her, she was happy when it happened. We kept moving and we found more. Two men in a cafe that shouldn't exist, sitting at a table with cups of something that might have been coffee. Both smiling, both dead, their eyes milky and vacant, but their expressions peaceful. A child in a doorway clutching a teddy bear. Same smile, same peaceful death. They're not decomposing, Ethan said, his voice tight. None of them. It's like time stopped for them the moment they died. Or like time here doesn't work the same way, Ava added. She was photographing everything now, her hands shaking worse. These people could have died yesterday or 70 years ago. There's no way to tell. We found a journal on one of the bodies, a researcher judging by the lab coat. The pages were filled with dense Russian script that Ava translated as we walked. Day 17. The creature showed us visions today, not threats, memories. It's memories. I saw worlds that don't exist in our physics, geometries that shouldn't be possible, and I understood. We've imprisoned something that was never meant to exist in three-dimensional space. She flipped pages. Day 23, Petrov died today. He was smiling when we found him, said he saw his daughter, the one who died in the war, said the creature gave her back to him just for a moment, just long enough to say goodbye. More pages. Day 31, I understand now what it's doing. It's not hunting us, it's teaching us, showing us what we took from it when we trapped it here. Every person who dies sees something beautiful first, something precious. The creature gives us that mercy before the end, more mercy than we ever showed it. The final entry was a single line. I hope it remembers us kindly. We found the researcher's body 3 buildings later. He was sitting in what might have been a library, surrounded by books and languages I didn't recognize. His hands were folded in his lap. His face carried that same peaceful smile. They weren't running from it, Ava said quietly. At the end, they weren't running. They were waiting for it. Justin's scream cut through the air again, and this time it was close. So close, I could hear the ragged edge of his voice, the way it broke on the high notes. We ran toward the sound, through streets that twisted back on themselves, through doorways that led to places they shouldn't, until we burst into a courtyard that was both open and enclosed simultaneously. And there he was. And Justin was pressed against a wall, his hands up, his face streaked with dirt and blood. He was staring at something I couldn't see yet, something just around the corner. His mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear over the sound of my own heartbeat. Justin. I shouted. He didn't respond, didn't even look at me. His eyes were fixed on whatever was approaching him, and the expression on his face wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was more complex than that. Terror mixed with wonder, mixed with something that looked almost like recognition. Then the creature stepped into view. It was smaller here than it had been in the square, compressed, like it was trying to make itself less threatening. Its translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that might have been beautiful if they weren't so alien. Those golden eyes were fixed on Justin with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Brother," it said, and the voice was in all our heads now, multiple tones layering over each other in harmonics that hurt to process. "Why do you run? I have shown you so much. Why do you not understand yet?" "I understand," Justin said, his voice. "I understand what you're trying to tell me, but I can't accept it. There has to be another way. There is no other way. Your people ensured that when they built the anchor, when they made my freedom contingent on suffering, the creature's head tilted, joints articulating wrong. But I am not asking you to accept it. Not yet. First, you must see, really see as they did." It gestured to the courtyard and the space shifted. Bodies appeared, not dead like the others. These were alive, trapped, chained to posts arranged in a circle around the courtyard, men and women in various states of decay, their bodies existing in different time streams. Some fresh, some skeletal, some somewhere in between. They were the test subjects from the bunker, the ones who'd been forced to witness the experiments. But here in this dimension, they were still alive, still screaming silently, still suffering. "Oh God," Ava whispered. One of them, a young woman, barely visible beneath the layers of temporal decay, turned her head toward us. Her mouth opened. No sound came out, but I could read her lips. "Help us. They've been here the whole time," Justin said, and his voice was hollow. Every person the researchers forced to witness the experiments, every test subject who interfaced with it and survived, they're all here trapped in the moment of their worst suffering. Over and over for decades, not decades, the creature corrected. Subjectively for them, it has been centuries, millennia. I did not put them here. Your scientists did when they opened the breach without understanding what they were opening. These souls are caught in the fold between dimensions. They cannot die, cannot leave, cannot even go mad because madness requires the passage of time. and time here is broken. Ethan had his knife out, was moving toward the nearest body. We have to free them. We have to. You cannot. They are not truly here. They are echoes, imprints left in the dimensional fabric. You see them because you are between worlds, but they exist outside of causality. There is no freeing them. Then what's the point of showing us? I demanded. Why make us witness this? Because you need to understand what your people did, what the cost of curiosity was. The creature moved closer, and the test subjects began to scream. Not with voices, with their entire beings. A sound that bypassed my ears and went directly into my brain. They did this in the name of science, in the name of understanding. And these are the results. Eternal suffering, consciousness without end. And I was forced to watch, to feel their pain along with my own for 73 years. The screaming stopped, the bodies froze, and in the silence I heard something else, weeping. The creature was weeping. Its form rippled, became less solid, and I realized the bioluminescent patterns weren't decorative. They were scars, marks left by decades of experiments, each one telling a story of pain I couldn't begin to comprehend. I did not want to become this, it said quietly. I was not meant to be a thing of terror. I guided travelers once, protected those who ventured into spaces they could not navigate alone. But your people took that from me, made me into something that knows only how to inflict the suffering that was inflicted upon me. The deaths, Ava said, the people we found, you killed them, I showed them mercy. The creature corrected. I gave them visions of what they loved most before the end. That is more kindness than I was ever shown. But yes, I killed them because they were part of the machine that imprisoned me, because their suffering, however brief, was a fraction of what I endured, and because it trailed off, and when it spoke again, the voice was different. Ashamed because I had forgotten how to be anything other than what they made me. Justin pushed himself away from the wall, standing on shaking legs. The loops. You've been killing me over and over, making me experience your pain. Yes, but each time you understood more. Each time you came closer to seeing what I need you to see. And now the courtyard shifted again. The test subjects vanished, replaced by something else. A laboratory, the same one from the bunker, but here intact, functioning, and inside, strapped to tables, were more victims. Dozens of them, all conscious, all screaming. Scientists in white coats moved between them, taking notes, adjusting instruments, cutting into flesh that regenerated as soon as the scalpel passed. An endless cycle of suffering. And in the center of it all, suspended in a cylinder that pulsed with sickly light, was a younger version of the creature. Smaller, weaker, its golden eyes wide with terror and pain. This is what they did, the creature said. For 64 years, every day, sometimes multiple times per day. They cut, they sampled, they mapped, and I could not stop them, could not speak, could not die. We didn't do this, I said. We weren't even born when, but you came searching just as they did. Always taking, always consuming, never asking what the cost might be. The creature's form expanded, filling the courtyard. You want to save your brother, I understand. I wanted to save my people too. But the door only opens one way now. And the price is always the same. A life for a life, Justin said. He wasn't looking at us anymore. His eyes were fixed on the laboratory, on the younger version of the creature suffering endlessly. Someone has to take your place in the anchor. Someone has to hold the breach closed while you go home. Yes, how long would they be trapped? I do not know. The researchers estimated 200 years before the breach collapses naturally, perhaps longer, perhaps less. There is no way to predict, no way. Justin laughed and the sound was broken. 200 years, conscious, aware, alone. Yes, though I suspect the imprisonment would not be as cruel as mine was. You would not be experimented upon, not tortured, simply waiting, holding the door closed, existing in the space between dimensions until the fabric repairs itself. That's still torture, Ethan said. Perhaps, but it is also mercy. Mercy I was never given. The choice to accept suffering willingly for a purpose rather than having it inflicted without consent. The creature's eyes dimmed. I will not force this. I will not become the monster they tried to make me, but someone must decide. and the decision must be made willingly. Otherwise, the cycle continues. Otherwise, you remain here, dying and waking forever as more test subjects for a prison that should never have been built. The laboratory faded, and we were back in the courtyard. The test subjects remained, frozen in their eternal suffering, silent witnesses to our conversation. "There's no other way?" Ava asked, her voice shaking. "No way to collapse the breach safely, no technology, or if there was, I would have found it. I have had 73 years to search every possibility. There is only this, a consciousness to replace mine. A willing sacrifice to hold the door until time itself repairs the damage your people caused." We stood there in silence, surrounded by the dead and the eternally dying, facing a choice no one should ever have to make. Let the creature go free and condemn someone to centuries of imprisonment, or refuse and become part of the eternal suffering ourselves. Justin was staring at his hands. They were covered in scars, dozens of them, crisscrossing his palms and fingers in patterns that looked almost deliberate. "These are from the loops. Every time I died, I woke up with more physical proof of what I've endured. Justin, I started 32 times," he continued, his voice distant. "I've died 32 times in the past 2 weeks, and each time it showed me more. Each time I understood better, and now I know exactly what it's asking, what it needs." He looked up at me, and his eyes were hollow, empty, like something inside him had broken and couldn't be repaired. "I know what I have to do. No." The word came out before I could stop it. "No, we'll find another way." "Will, there is no other way," Justin's voice cracked. "Don't you understand? I've been searching for 2 weeks, dying over and over, trying every possibility, and there's only one solution. Someone stays, someone holds the anchor, and that someone is going to be me. You're not thinking clearly. You're traumatized, malnourished. We can't let you make this decision when I'm what? When I'm the only one who's actually lived through this, the only one who understands what the creature went through." He laughed bitterly. "I'm the only one here qualified to make this decision, Anders, because I'm the only one who knows exactly what I'm agreeing to." Ava had moved to one of the frozen test subjects, was examining them with tears streaming down her face. "They're still conscious, all of them. I can see it in their eyes. They're aware of us. Aware of themselves, trapped in a single moment of agony for what might be centuries. They cannot be freed," the creature said again. "They are beyond saving, but they bear witness, as I bore witness, as someone else will have to bear witness if this is to end." "Why?" Ethan demanded. "Why does it have to be this way? Why can't you just leave? Why does the anchor need a consciousness at all?" "Because the breach is not a simple tear in space. It is a wound in the fundamental fabric of reality. It requires active maintenance. Constant attention, a mind holding it closed through force of will alone. Your scientists understood this when they built the containment system. They designed it to use me as the anchor, my consciousness as the seal. But they did not account for one thing." "What?" I asked. "That I would eventually be freed, and when I leave, the seal breaks. The only way to prevent total dimensional collapse is for another consciousness to take my place, to become the new anchor, the new seal." The creature's form rippled. "It is cruel. It is wrong. But it is the reality your people created, and now someone must accept that reality willingly or everyone dies." Justin had started walking not toward us, toward the creature. His steps were slow, deliberate, final. "Justin, stop." I moved to block him, but Ethan grabbed my arm. "Let him decide," Ethan said quietly. "It's his choice. It's not a choice. He's been tortured for 2 weeks. He's not capable of—" "I'm more capable than you think." Justin's voice was steady now, calm, like he'd finally found the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. "I've spent 32 lifetimes preparing for this moment. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know exactly what it costs." He stopped in front of the creature, and they regarded each other. Predator and prey, prisoner and jailer, victim and witness. "You would do this?" the creature asked. "Truly, after all I have done to you. You didn't do anything to me except show me the truth," Justin said. "And yeah, I would do this because someone has to, because you deserve to go home." And because he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that actually matters, something real, not chasing shadows or proving theories, but saving something that should never have been imprisoned. The creature's eyes brightened, and I saw something in them that I hadn't seen before, not just gratitude, respect. Then come, it said, let me show you one more thing before you decide. Finally, one truth I have not yet shared. It extended its hand toward Justin, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. The world exploded into light. Not violent, not painful, just overwhelming. Pure sensory data flooding into our brains faster than we could process. I saw the creature's home world, a place where dimensions folded naturally, where reality was fluid, where beings like it moved through space as easily as we breathed air. The moment of betrayal. Soviet soldiers, scientists, equipment that tore a hole between worlds and dragged the creature through. Decades of imprisonment. The cylinder, the experiments, the endless suffering. And underneath it all, threading through every memory like a pulse, loneliness, absolute crushing loneliness. The knowledge that it was the only one of its kind trapped here, that its people had tried to reach it and failed, that it was fundamentally, utterly alone. The visions faded, and we were back in the courtyard. Justin was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. Ethan had his hands pressed to his temples. Ava was openly sobbing. "You've been alone for 73 years, Justin whispered. No one to talk to, no one who understood, just you and the humans who tortured you. Yes, the creature said quietly. And I do not wish that loneliness on anyone, not even my captors. But the choice remains. Someone must stay, someone must be alone. And if you truly understand what I have shown you, if you truly comprehend the weight of that isolation, then I will not stop you from making this choice. But I will not pretend it is anything other than what it is. A sentence, a sacrifice, a burden that will break you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Justin stood slowly, his legs shaking but holding. He looked at us, at me, Ethan, Ava, and something passed across his face. Not regret, not fear, something closer to peace. "I need to talk to my brother," he said. "EA alone." The creature nodded once, then flowed backward, dissolving into the space between buildings. Ethan and Ava moved to a different part of the courtyard, giving us privacy, even though I knew they could still hear everything. Justin sat down on the ground, and I sat beside him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there in the impossible city, surrounded by the eternal suffering of those who'd come before, and breathed. "You can't do this." I finally said, "Please, there has to be another way." "There isn't." His voice was gentle, kind, like he was explaining something to a child. "I've looked, Anders. I've died 32 times looking, and every time I come back to the same conclusion. Someone has to stay, and it should be me. Why you? Because I'm the only one who understands what the creature went through, the only one who's experienced even a fraction of that loneliness." He laughed softly. "Do you know what I thought about every time I died? Every time I woke up back in this place, knowing I had to run and hide and eventually die again. What? That at least I wasn't alone in my suffering, that somewhere the creature was experiencing the same thing, and that somehow that made it bearable." He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "I'm not afraid of being alone, little brother. I've been alone my whole life, chasing mysteries no one else cared about, living for questions no one else was asking. And now I can do something that actually answers something important, something real. You'll be trapped for 200 years. Maybe more conscious, aware, unable to move or speak, or I stay here and die 32 more times, or 100 more, or 1,000, until eventually I forget what it's like to be anything other than prey." He shook his head. "At least in the anchor, I'll have a purpose. I'll be holding something closed, protecting both dimensions from collapsing into each other. That's better than running forever. Justin, I need you to promise me something." He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "When you get back, when you tell people what happened here, don't make me a martyr. Don't make it sound noble or heroic or any of that garbage. Just tell them I made a choice. A hard choice, but a choice that mattered. My vision blurred. I can't lose you. You already lost me 2 weeks ago when I came here. I've been dead since then, Anders. I just didn't know it yet." He smiled, and it was genuine, peaceful, but now I can die for something. And that's more than most people get. We sat there for another minute, my hand in his, neither of us speaking. The test subjects remained frozen around us, eternal witnesses to our final conversation. Finally, Justin stood, pulled me to my feet, hugged me hard enough that I felt his ribs through his torn shirt. "I love you," he said, "and I'm sorry for all the times I dragged you into my messes, but thank you for coming to find me. Thank you for being here at the end." Then he stepped back, turned away, and called out to the creature, "I'm ready." The creature flowed back into existence, its form solidifying into something almost solid, almost human. "You are certain?" "Yes." "Then come and I will show you what waits." Justin walked toward it without looking back, without hesitation, without fear. And as he passed into the space where the creature waited, the courtyard began to shift one final time. The buildings pulled back like curtains, revealing a passage I hadn't seen before. And at the end of that passage, glowing with soft light, stood the cylinder, empty, waiting. Justin stopped at its base, placed his hand on the glass, and looked back at us one more time. His mouth formed 3 words, "It's okay, brother." Then he climbed inside. The viscous liquid began to rise. I watched it seep up from the base of the cylinder, thick and gel-like, the color of old amber with darker threads suspended in it. It moved like it was alive, reaching for Justin with tendrils that wrapped around his ankles and climbed higher. Justin stood perfectly still. His hands pressed against the glass from inside. His eyes found mine, and I saw no fear there, just acceptance. The liquid reached his waist, his chest, his neck, and all the while the creature watched. Its translucent form had become more solid now, its golden eyes reflecting the light from the cylinder. "Anders, Ethan's hand on my shoulder. When the exchange completes, this place is going to destabilize." I couldn't respond. The liquid had reached Justin's chin, now was lapping at his mouth. He took one final breath, closed his eyes, and let it cover him completely. For a moment, nothing happened. Nothing. Justin floated in the center, suspended, his body slowly rotating in the viscous gel. Then the machinery engaged. Not mechanical sounds, something else. A hum that started low and built, resonating through the ground, through my bones, through reality itself. The symbols carved into the courtyard began to glow, and the cylinder became something more than glass and liquid. It became a doorway, a threshold between dimensions. I could see through it now, beyond Justin, to the space between worlds, to the dimensional fabric itself, stretched thin and torn and held together only by force of will. And in the center of that tier, anchored to it like a spider in its web, was the younger version of the creature we'd seen in the laboratory, still trapped, still holding the breach closed through decades of agony. As Justin settled into the cylinder, that younger version began to fade. The anchor was transferring. The creature screamed, not with voice, with everything. Relief, agony, joy, grief, freedom, all at once. Its form began to shift, to expand, to become less solid and more energy. The golden eyes brightened until they were like small suns. "It is done," the voice said. Clearer now, stronger. "The anchor is released. I am free. I am." And then it did something I didn't expect. It turned back to the cylinder, to Justin, and its form collapsed inward, becoming small again, almost human-shaped. "But there is one more thing, one gift I can give before I leave." "What are you doing?" Ava asked. The creature pressed both hands against the cylinder glass, and the bioluminescent patterns on its skin began to pulse faster, brighter. The symbols carved into the courtyard flared, with light so intense I had to shield my eyes. Through my fingers, I saw it reaching into the cylinder. Not physically, but something else. Some part of itself extending through the dimensional barrier, through the gel reaching for Justin. The liquid began to churn, to swirl around Justin's suspended body, and as it moved, I saw changes happening. The scars on Justin's hands were fading. The hollowness in his face was filling. The damage from 2 weeks of dying and waking was reversing. But it was more than that. Light gathered around him, not just reflected light, something being pulled from the dimensional fabric itself and woven into Justin's body. threads of pure energy being integrated into his cells. "What is it doing?" Ethan whispered. Ava had her camera out, recording with shaking hands. "It's reconstructing him, using dimensional energy to rebuild his body at the molecular level. You gave yourself willingly." The creature's voice was softer now. "You accepted my burden. You showed mercy to something that had forgotten what mercy felt like. I cannot undo your choice. The anchor requires consciousness, but I can give you this one gift, one act of gratitude before I return home." The light peaked. The cylinder screamed with dimensional stress. And then everything stopped. Justin floated in the cylinder, his eyes still closed, but he looked different now. Younger, healthier, like the past 2 weeks had been erased entirely. The creature stepped back, its form flickering, unstable. The gift had cost it something. "He will wake, not now, not here, but when you return to your world, when the anchor settles, he will wake, and he will remember everything." The creature's head tilted. "That is my gift to him, not forgetting, but understanding. The knowledge that his suffering had purpose." "Wait," I moved closer. "You're saying he'll wake up, that he won't be trapped for 200 years? No, he will be trapped. The anchor requires consciousness, but he will not be alone in the way I was alone." The creature gestured to the courtyard, to the frozen test subjects. "This dimension exists because of the anchor, and now that he has taken my place, it is his. He can shape it, control it, make it less hostile." "I don't understand," Ava said. "Your brother will spend the next 2 centuries maintaining the breach." "Yes, but he will also be guardian of this space where dimensions fold, where the test subjects remain trapped." The creature's voice grew quieter. "He can give them mercy, can reshape this reality into something less cruel, can make their suffering end, even if he cannot free them. That is more than I could do. He can help them." Ethan stared at the frozen subjects in time. "As he learns, as he grows into his role, I have given him the tools, the understanding, the connection to the dimensional fabric. What he does with them is his choice, his purpose, his way of making the next 2 centuries bearable." "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate. "Thank you for giving him that much." The creature's eyes found mine. "Thank your brother. He chose mercy over survival. That is rarer than you know." The ground beneath us began to shake. The dimensional fabric was adjusting to the new anchor. "You must leave now. When I pass through, this place will collapse. You have minutes. How do we get back?" Ava asked. The creature gestured and a passage appeared, the same one we'd marked with chalk, our trail leading back to reality. "Follow your marks. The path will hold long enough, but do not look back. Do not stop." "Anders," Ethan was pulling at my arm, "we have to go." But I couldn't move, couldn't leave. "Justin, I'm sorry," I said to the glass. "I'm so sorry I didn't come with you." The creature's hand touched my shoulder gently. "He forgives you. He knew you would come when it mattered, and you did. That is enough." Another tremor. The buildings were starting to blur. "Go. Honor him by surviving, by remembering, by making sure his choice meant something." Ethan grabbed me and pulled. I stumbled backward away from the cylinder, toward the passage. The last thing I saw was the creature turning toward the portal. The tear in reality showing glimpses of something beyond, something that might have been home. It stopped at the threshold and looked back. "Free," it said, and stepped through. The dimensions screamed. Reality tore in half. The buildings collapsed inward, folding through impossible angles. The sky bled. The ground dissolved. We ran through passages shrinking as we sprinted past the bodies we'd found. The researcher, the woman, the child, all fading into transparency, past the shadows of ourselves flickering and vanishing. Ava was ahead, following the glowing chalk marks. Ethan gripped my jacket, and behind us I could hear it. The sound of a dimension dying, the wet tearing noise amplified, the screaming of test subjects finally being released, the groan of reality being unmade. A building collapsed across our path. Ethan dove through a window, pulling me with him. We rolled, came up running. The passage ahead was shrinking, visibly compressing. 50 m, 40, 30, faster. Ava screamed. 20 m, 10. Ava dove through, disappeared. Ethan shoved me forward, and then I was falling through layers of reality peeling away. Through the dimensional fabric itself, Through the space between moments where physics didn't apply, I saw things I couldn't describe, shapes in too many dimensions, colors without names, the raw stuff of creation, and then concrete. I hit the bunker floor hard enough to crack ribs, real solid. This world concrete. Ava was beside me groaning. Ethan landed a second later, rolled, came up in a crouch. The portal collapsed with a sound like a sigh, and suddenly the bunker chamber was just a chamber. Cold, dark, empty, except for us and the cylinder. It stood in the center, exactly where it had been, but different now. The liquid inside was clearer, and floating in the center, Justin. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, his body whole and healthy. He looked like he was sleeping, but I knew he wouldn't wake. Not here, not now. He was maintaining the anchor, holding the breach closed, existing in that space between dimensions. I crawled to the cylinder, pressed my hand against the glass. It was warm, pulsing with a rhythm that might have been a heartbeat. "Justin," I whispered, "can you hear me?" No response. His expression didn't change, but something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, just acknowledgement. Like some part of him, some deep part in the anchor space had heard me. "We need to leave." Ava's voice was, "The structure isn't stable. I can see cracks. If we don't seal this place now, it could collapse." "Seal it how?" She pulled thermite charges from her pack. "These will bring down the support columns. The entire bunker will collapse. Bury the cylinder. Make sure no one ever finds it." "No," the word came out savage. "We can't just bury him alive. He's not alive, not in the way we understand." Ara's voice was gentle but firm. "He's in the anchor space now between dimensions. What happens to his body here doesn't affect his consciousness there." "She's right," Ethan said. "And if we don't seal this, someone will find it eventually. Try to replicate what the Soviets did." I looked at Justin one more time. At my brother, floating in liquid that pulsed with dimensional energy, maintaining a breach between worlds. He wasn't here anymore. He was in that space between, in the anchor point where he'd spend the next 2 centuries. This body was just an echo. "Do it," I said. Ava moved quickly, placing charges at key support points. 3 minutes we climbed through corridors that were now just corridors, through the bunker levels that had returned to merely being old, through passages where our chalk marks still glowed faintly. At the top, I looked back one final time down the stairs into the darkness that hid the chamber. "I won't forget," I said. "I promise." The charges blew, muffled by tons of earth, but we felt it. Felt the school collapse inward as support columns vaporized. We ran for the exit, made it outside just as the final collapse happened. The ground subsided, folding down. The school disappeared into a crater. Dust rose in a plume, and when it settled, there was nothing, just a depression in the frozen earth. Just another wound that would fill with snow and eventually look like it had always been there. "It's done," Ava said. We walked back to the aerostrip in silence. The pilot flew us to Newark without questions. In the city, we found a hotel, showered, changed, and that night, we tried to make sense of what we'd experienced. "He chose it," Ethan said, staring at his shaking hands. "That's important." "Does it?" I asked. He was traumatized, malnourished. He died 32 times. He understood more than we did. Ava said, laptop open, downloading photos. He saw what the creature experienced, and he decided ending that suffering was worth his own. That's heroism or suicide, maybe both. She looked at me, eyes red. "But it's done. We have to decide what we do with it. Tell people, find other sites, or let it end here." I thought about the creature's final words, about Justin existing in that space between worlds, about the frost that would form on my window months from now. "Free. We tell his story," I said. "Not all of it, but enough. Enough so people know he did something that mattered." "And the other sites?" Ethan asked. "I'm going to find them." Ava closed her laptop. "To document, to understand, to make sure no one else makes the mistake of opening doors that should stay closed alone. Unless you want to come." I looked at Ethan. He looked at me, and without words, we both knew. We'd follow, would document everything, would make sure that what happened to the creature and to Justin never happened again. Not out of heroism, but because we'd made a promise to remember, to witness, to make sure their suffering meant something. We flew home the next day. Ethan to Seattle, Ava to London, me to Denver. But nothing was the same because I'd witnessed suffering that transcended human comprehension. And I'd watched my brother choose to accept that suffering so that something ancient could finally go home. 6 months later, I woke up to frost on my window. It was July. The frost shouldn't have been there, but when I looked closer, I saw it had formed into symbols. The same ones from the bunker. They spelled one word, free. I touched the glass. The frost didn't melt, just stayed there. Perfect. Impossible. A message from somewhere beyond. From the creature thanking us, from Justin letting me know he was still there, from the universe itself, acknowledging what had been done. I took a photo, sent it to Ava and Ethan. Ava, I found another site, Kazakhstan. I'm going in next week. Ethan, I'm coming with you. And then from both, are you in? I looked at the frost, at the word that wouldn't melt, at the promise I'd made free. Yes, I was in, because Justin had given up his freedom so that something ancient could reclaim theirs. The least I could do was honor that choice, document every sight, remember, witness, keep the promise. That night, I started writing everything that happened, every detail. I don't know if anyone will believe it, but Justin asked me to tell his story. So here it is. My brother's name is Justin Dukes. He was 34 years old. He spent his life chasing mysteries no one believed in, and in the end, he found one. Something that should never have been imprisoned, and he chose to free it at the cost of 200 years of his own life. At the cost of everything except the one thing that mattered most, his choice. There's a bunker in Siberia, sealed beneath tons of rubble, where my brother maintains an anchor between dimensions. He'll be there for 2 centuries, conscious, aware, holding reality together so that something ancient could finally go home. And every morning, there's frost on my window that won't melt. Spelling a word that breaks my heart and fills it simultaneously. Free. Because of him, something that had forgotten freedom finally remembered. Because of him, test subjects who'd suffered for decades were released. Because of him, a breach between worlds didn't collapse. Because of him. So I'm writing this down, posting it where people can find it, where maybe someone will read it and understand what he did. My brother freed something that should never have been imprisoned, and in doing so, he imprisoned himself. That's the story, that's the truth. That's the choice he made, and I'll carry it for the rest of my life. The frost is still on my window, free. Thank you, Justin, for showing me what sacrifice really means. I won't forget, I promise. Arca asking for relief. Thought about 419 other files, other creatures, other impossible things. What exactly would I do? Restore the archive, document everything, help us understand what's out there. Why? Because they're real, Mr. Wren. They've always been real, and someone needs to keep track. I sat back, felt the weight of what I just agreed to. Do I get paid? Adequately? My cat comes with me. The man paused, then nodded. Agreed. The SUV merged onto the highway. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I could still hear Wilhelm's voice. Tell no one. Let me be forgotten. I was about to do the exact opposite. For better or worse, I was in this now, all the way in.